One franchise we love here on RGT 85 is the Resident Evil franchise. I have very fond memories of the first Resident Evil game, as it was the first Resident Evil that I had ever played. I remember going to a Kroger grocery store one weekend, yes, a grocery store, and renting a PlayStation 1 with a copy of Resident Evil from them. I'm not quite sure why Kroger was renting out video games and video game systems, but they were, and I wasn't complaining about it. Now, I did not get a memory card, and that came to bite me in the ass because I didn't realize that you could not save games onto the system, that it had no internal memory. I was pretty young, so what do you expect? But I remember playing Resident Evil 1 and just being absolutely blown away by the game. I really had never played a game that had such interesting storytelling, that had such an interesting environment, and of course zombies hadn't really been portrayed in a more mature and realistic style before Resident Evil 1, so I was absolutely in love with that game. I remember getting to the Yawn, which was the giant snake, and dying, and since I did not have a memory card, that was the end of my voyage for Resident Evil 1. But of course, as time went on, I played the game again and defeated it, and it's just an absolute classic. Well, Resident Evil 1, of course, got a remake on the GameCube, and it was a fantastic version of the game. It was the way a remake should be done. It stuck to the source material, but added things, and added new graphics, and added new enemies, and new areas. It really changed up things, but still felt very familiar, and it was just an absolute masterpiece of a game. A lot of people really enjoy Resident Evil 1's remake, and say it's their favorite Resident Evil game. Well, of course, Resident Evil is back in the limelight, and Capcom has announced that Resident Evil 2 is getting a remake, and then that was it. Things have been very quiet on the Resident Evil 2 remake front for quite a while now, and people are expecting and hoping to see some more information of this game at E3 2008. Well, a popular horror gaming website just put up an exclusive rumor today that I think sounds very interesting, and I think it's something worth discussing because it sort of sheds some light on what we could potentially see from Resident Evil 2's remake. So what's going on with the Resident Evil 2 remake? How far along is it? And will it be at E3? And if it is, what can we expect to see? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. So sit back, relax, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and let's talk about the Resident Evil 2 remake.
Hey, RGT85. Hey, Sean.
Oh my God, it's Stevie Richards!
So this rumor is coming to us from a website called RelyOnHorror.com. I've looked around on their website, I've sort of done some investigative work on them, and they seem like a legit website, pretty large, and it doesn't seem like they just report on any rumor. Now, they're saying that one of their sources close to the project told them about these individual gameplay details for Resident Evil 2 Remake and what to expect in the game. Of course, it is just a rumor, so take it as a grain of salt, but I feel confident enough in this article to at least discuss it and the potential of the game. So the first thing that they mention is that this game will be showcased at E3 2018, which I think is something that will happen, honestly. It's definitely been very quiet on this front. Capcom doesn't really have many things going on right now. They've obviously released a bunch of bigger games lately, games like Resident Evil 7, Monster Hunter World, so those are some of their big IPs and their big franchises, so I don't really expect them to have too much inside of the realm of new stuff, and I think this game, having been announced already, could be a good launching place for their E3 2018 presentation. Now, according to this rumor, Resident Evil 2's remake will run on the RE engine, but it's been significantly optimized and upgraded with new tech, including revamped lighting and shadow systems. Now, that, of course, is the engine that we saw in Resident Evil 7, which looks absolutely fantastic. It has a very photorealistic style to the game, and I would love to see Resident Evil 2 redone in that style. You think of all the different places within the game that would really benefit from a more realistic looking style, such as, you know, the police station and all that stuff. So I think that would be really cool if that's what's being implemented. It's aiming for a solid 30 frames per second at 1080p on the standard PS4 and 60 frames per second at native 4K on the PS4 Pro. So pretty lofty expectations there. It'll definitely be interesting to see if they can hit those expectations. Double the frame rate and, you know, 4K on the PS4 Pro. That sounds pretty interesting, and depending on how good the game is, I might actually have to look into upgrading to a PS4 Pro. The engine loads different resolutions each time you enter a room, so some rooms may not always be native 4K, and assets may be dynamically scaled to keep it easy on the hardware. That said, the game will be the first Resident Evil title designed with 4K resolution in mind, making it the best looking Capcom game to date. So once again, pretty interesting stuff. They're obviously putting a big focus on graphics. Obviously, Resident Evil 7, fantastic looking game. I'm totally on board with doing a style of game as far as the visuals are concerned with Resident Evil 2's remake. Now, as far as the actual characters are concerned, it does say that Capcom apparently took note of fans' confusion over Chris in Resident Evil 7, feeling like he didn't really look like Chris, so they are going to make Leon and Claire more like their original counterparts. And as far as what Claire is wearing, it does look like they are going to modernize the outfit, but still retain some things. I don't know, I think it would be cool just to keep that sort of 90s aesthetic, as that's sort of, you know, when the game took place. So I don't know if they're going to try to update it in the timeline or what, but obviously the game took place in the late 90s, and that's the world it was in, so it seems kind of weird to modernize what she was wearing. Now, the real question that everyone is wondering with the Resident Evil 2 remake is the gameplay style. We have seen a bunch of different gameplay styles, from the Resident Evil 1 tank controls, to the more free-moving Resident Evil 4 style, to the more action-oriented Resident Evil 6 style, to of course the first-person perspective in Resident Evil 7. So what is Resident Evil 2's remake going to have in terms of gameplay? According to this, the game's perspective has been a point of contention among fans, with some hoping for classic fixed angles. With the success of Resident Evil 7, instead it sounds like Capcom has taken inspiration from the popularity of Resident Evil 4 over-the-shoulder camera. According to their source, the remake has been designed with a camera akin to Resident Evil 4, but in a more stylized in execution. And finally, the article wraps up saying that the game's development brought in outside contractors who had worked on the series previously. It'll include people who worked on Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 4. It will have new campaigns for both Leon and Claire, but the game will be overall much longer with the original content, plus lots of new content and areas. So pretty much it sounds like they're trying to blend Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil 4 with Resident Evil 2 for this remake. And on paper, I think that sounds really good. Resident Evil 7 had a fantastic visual style. That RE engine is really freaking awesome, and I really like it and what it's capable of doing. It really portrays sort of a photorealistic style that is just pretty much unmatched in my opinion in terms of other games. And of course the gameplay of Resident Evil 4, people love it, you know, and at first I was not a huge fan of Resident Evil 4, as shocking as that may sound. On the GameCube, I was not a huge fan of it, but when I replayed it on the Wii, I really fell in love with it. And of course, I played it on subsequent versions of the game as well, because it's been, like, released on everything. So, Resident Evil 4, you know, that gameplay style really brought in a whole new era of Resident Evil fans. And while I prefer the tank controls and things like that, I definitely understand why they would go for that. But I think the main thing with the Resident Evil 2 remake is you don't want to deviate too far from the source material, because like I said about the first Resident Evil remake, that's what made the game special. You know, it was definitely modernized, it was definitely different. They added in new characters. You had Lisa Trevor, who was a brand new character. They added in new areas, new enemies, the Crimson Heads, but it still retained the feel of the original game. It still felt like Resident Evil 1, just modernized, and I think that's what they really need to go with Resident Evil 2's remake. You don't want to deviate too far from the original stuff, and doing things like the Resident Evil 4 camera could potentially turn some people off to this. I understand that that is a preferred gameplay style, but I think it might potentially be too big of a difference. I don't know. It really hurts that we haven't seen anything on the game, because obviously the game in motion and the game in action could end up being absolutely fantastic. I just hope that they don't deviate too far from the source material and just expand upon it. Just add more stuff, add more characters, add more enemies, add in modern graphics, and I think you really have a winner. The gameplay is going to be decisive no matter what style you go with, because there's always people that prefer different styles of Resident Evil. As long as you get it down good though, I think everyone will be happy. So that's the latest going on in the world of Resident Evil 2's remake. I honestly feel like we will see it at E3 2018, and if it ends up looking just like this and sounding just like this, what is in this article, I honestly would not be very surprised, and I think it could be potentially pretty cool. So let me know in the comment section down below what you think of this story. Are you looking forward to Resident Evil 2's remake? Do you expect to see it at E3? And if so, what do you think of the style that this article pretty much portrays, a sort of blending of Resident Evil 7, 4, and 2 in terms of graphics, gameplay, and of course source material. And thank you for watching this video. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. We're doing all sorts of crazy videos on this channel all the time. I want to thank you guys once again for passing 100,000 subscribers. I am running a contest right now to do a little giveaway for you guys, so make sure you enter that contest. I'll have a pinned comment in the comment section down below. Very easy to enter, and thank you for watching this video. If you really enjoyed it, check out all the links in the description box down below. We got Patreon, t-shirts, social media, all sorts of fun ways to keep up to date with the ever-growing world of RGT 85, and I will catch you guys on the next video. Later.
RGT 85! RGT 85! RGT.